I'm Jordan Miller, 29 years old, the kind of man who prefers things lined up in rows and columns. Data analyst by trade, numbers guy by nature. My life was running on rails. Good job, decent apartment, and a 5-year plan that ticked along like a clock. I'd wound myself. At the center of it all was Sophia. She was my girlfriend for 4 years, my fiancée for 1, and in my head, she was supposed to be my wife for the rest. We talked kids, a house in the suburbs, barbecues on Saturdays, the works. She hated numbers. I loved spreadsheets. So, when it came to planning the wedding, it made sense. She picked colors and flowers, I ran the budget. We opened a high-yield savings account in my name. Her idea, she said she trusted me to keep it simple. Every paycheck, she transferred her part into my checking, and I moved the combined total into that fund. 10 months of discipline built it up to $22,000. Enough to cover the venue deposit, the caterer, the photographer. Enough to prove that we were on track. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Coffee in one hand, bagel in the other. I logged in to confirm the venue check would clear. My brain registered the number before I even finished chewing. Not 22,000. 3,500. I stared at the screen, blinking like it was some glitch. I refreshed the page. Same number. I opened the transaction history, scrolling with a cold weight sinking into my chest. 3 transfers, spaced an hour apart, neat as soldiers in a row. Each one to the same name, Dylan Vance. It wasn't just the money that vanished at that moment. It was the illusion that my plan was bulletproof. Sophia's ex, the tortured artist she once swore was a closed chapter, the mistake of her early 20s. She told me about him on our second date, how he mooched off her, played guitar more than he worked, and left her drained in every way that mattered. I'd believed her. Hell, I'd even respected her for walking away from him back then. But there it was. Dylan's name, bold and undeniable on my bank statement, staring back at me like a fingerprint left at a crime scene. I didn't slam the table, didn't punch the wall, didn't scream her name across the apartment. My anger didn't come out hot. It froze me from the inside out, like someone dumped a bucket of ice water straight into my veins. The world around me carried on. The neighbor's dog barked. A car horn blared 3 stories down. But in my apartment, silence pressed down like concrete. I closed the laptop. I sat there with my coffee going cold, staring at the plain white wall across from me. My 5-year plan hadn't just cracked. It had split wide open. And somewhere deep in that silence, I made my first decision. I wasn't going to yell, beg, or plead. I was going to handle this the way I handle everything. Methodically, patiently, with precision. Because if Sophia thought she could steal my future and still smile at me across the dinner table, she had no idea what kind of man she was really engaged to. The thing about betrayal is that Hollywood gets it wrong. They always show the husband flipping tables, throwing bottles, screaming until his voice breaks. I didn't do any of that. I didn't have to. My strength wasn't in losing control. It was in not giving Sophia a single crack to crawl through. I spent that Tuesday night at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The same table where we'd eaten takeout and laughed about wedding playlists. Now it was covered in screenshots, transaction pages, account balances. I printed everything, slid the pages into a manila folder, labeled and dated. Not for me, I didn't need proof. But I knew one day someone else would. The next morning, I took an early train downtown and walked straight into the bank. Polished marble floors, fake smiles from tellers. I asked for a fraud specialist. 10 minutes later, I was in a glass-walled office across from a guy in a blue tie who smelled like cologne and caffeine. "Mr. Miller, these transfers, did you authorize them?" "No," I said flatly. "And the recipient is my fiancé's ex-boyfriend." His eyebrows ticked up. He took notes, filed forms, and promised the account would be frozen. He gave me a pamphlet with a fraud hotline number like it was a bandage for a bullet wound. I thanked him, shook his hand, and walked out. Then I headed 2 blocks over to the precinct. Beige walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee. I sat down with a detective who looked like he'd seen too many divorce cases turn ugly. I handed over the folder, explained the transfers, the engagement, the stolen fund. He nodded slowly, slid me a case number across the desk. You did the right thing documenting all this. Keep everything. We'll be in touch. By the time I got back to my office, it wasn't even lunch yet. On paper, nothing had changed. I still had my job, my apartment, my bank account. But inside, a switch had flipped. Sophia wasn't my partner anymore. She was a liability. That night, when I walked through the door, the apartment smelled like basil and garlic. Sophia was in the kitchen, humming off-key to a song on her phone, stirring sauce like it was any other night. She turned, smiled, kissed me on the cheek. "Long day?" she asked. "Not bad," I said, hanging my jacket. She talked about bridesmaid dresses, about how her sister wanted blush pink instead of lavender, about how the florist said peonies were out of season but roses would work. I nodded at the right times, offered half smiles, and played the role. What she didn't know was that while she hummed and stirred and dreamed out loud, every word she spoke was laying bricks on a wall I was building between us. She thought she was planning a wedding. I was already planning the dismantling of our engagement. 2 days passed like that. She kissed me goodnight. She asked about catering options. She left her phone face down on the counter like always, thinking she was clever. I let her. My silence was a loaded gun, safety on, waiting. On the second night, lying in bed with her curled against my side, she whispered, "I can't wait to be your wife." I stared at the ceiling fan, listening to the blades slice the air. I didn't answer, because in my head, I already knew. By the time she realized what I'd done, it would be too late to undo it. The bank was frozen. The cops had their case. And I wasn't going to save her from the wreckage she'd created. That silence wasn't a weakness. It was the kind of silence a man keeps when he's already made his move and is just waiting for the world to catch up. Quarterly presentations are supposed to be routine. I'd prepped my slides, rehearsed the metrics, ready to walk a room full of senior VPs through our numbers. Data is clean, predictable. People aren't. I was mid-sentence, pointing to a graph about quarterly growth, when the glass doors of the conference room slammed open. There she was, Sophia. Not alone, her parents, Diana and Ralph, right behind her like backup singers in some twisted performance. She was red-faced, hair wild, voice already cracking before the words even hit the air. "You froze the account," she screamed. "You ruined everything." The room went dead silent. My boss, a man who usually cared only about profit margins, leaned back in his chair like he'd just been handed front-row tickets to a train wreck. Sophia stormed to the head of the table, slamming her palm down on the polished wood. "That money was for our wedding. You had no right." Calm as stone, I set down the remote for my presentation. "Correction," I said evenly. "That money was in my account, in my name, and you wired it to Dylan Vance without authorization." Her parents flanked her like lawyers. Diana's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Jordan, you've always been controlling, micromanaging. She took a little money to help a friend, and you're treating her like a criminal." My coworkers shifted in their seats, glancing between us, waiting for me to crumble. But I didn't. I leaned forward, voice steady enough to fill the room. "She didn't take a little money. She stole nearly $19,000. And for the record, I've already filed a police report." That silenced even Diana. Sophia's face twisted, a mix of shock and rage, like she hadn't imagined I'd call her bluff in front of an audience. You're destroying us," she shrieked, her voice echoing down the hall. "You're stealing our future." I stood, buttoning my jacket, looking her dead in the eye. "No, you destroyed it the moment you wired our savings to your ex-boyfriend. That was the future." Her shrill voice carried down the corridor as security finally arrived. My boss gave a curt nod, and within minutes, the three of them were being escorted out. Sophia twisted in their grip, heels scraping on the polished floor, still shouting accusations that only made her sound guilty. When the doors shut, silence hung heavy again. All eyes on me. I picked up the remote, clicked to the next slide. As I was saying, "I told the room, Q2 exceeded expectations by 14%. A ripple of laughter broke the tension, and just like that, I had validation. Not just from the numbers on my slides, but from the way my colleagues looked at me, steady, unflinching, the man who held his ground. Sophia thought she could corner me, shame me, break me in public. Instead, she revealed herself, and I hadn't raised my voice once. By the end of that meeting, I wasn't just Jordan Miller, data analyst. I was Jordan Miller, the man who drew a line and refused to let anyone drag him across it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that guilty people never sit still. They scramble, they claw, they spin stories until they're dizzy enough to believe them themselves. Sophia was no different. Within a week of the office blow-up, the phone calls started. Old friends, cousins I hadn't spoken to in months, even one of my college buddies who lived 2 states away. All of them had heard the same thing, that I was financially abusive, that I kept Sophia under my thumb, that I froze the account to punish her. The script was too polished to be just Sophia. Diana had her fingerprints all over it. That woman always did love playing conductor, waving her baton, convinced the orchestra would follow. But the problem with lies is they always have missing notes. Mutual friends saw through it immediately. The same people who'd watched Sophia shop like money grew on trees, who'd noticed Dylan lurking back in her orbit, weren't about to believe I was some tyrant in the shadows. Still, the smear campaign wasn't designed to convince everyone. It was meant to rattle me, to push me into dropping the charges. When that didn't work, the messages got personal. One night, close to midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "I'm pregnant. We need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time, anger steady, not hot. My lawyer had warned me this might come. "Desperation breeds miracles," he'd said dryly. "Don't be surprised if an immaculate conception shows up in your inbox." I typed back one line. "A court-ordered paternity test will settle that." Her reply never came. The next day, she acted like the message had never been sent. The pregnancy evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. Then came their so-called offer. An email drafted with lawyerly pomp but no legal weight. If I dropped the charges, Sophia would repay me at the generous rate of $100 a month. I read it twice, laughed out loud, then forwarded it to my attorney. His reply came in less than 5 minutes. "Tell them to shove it. We'll counter with a civil suit." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the glow of the city outside my window. Anger still hummed inside me, but it was different now. Not the ice of discovery, not the fire of public humiliation. This was the steady burn of resolve. Sophia and Diana thought they were playing chess, moving pawns across the board, setting traps. What they didn't realize was that I'd already taken their queen the moment I walked into the bank and filed the fraud report. Everything else was noise. The smear campaign, the phantom pregnancy, the laughable repayment plan, all of it was just flailing. And me? I didn't need to flail. I had the law, the paperwork, the patience. Men like me don't win with screaming matches. We win by outlasting the storm until the liars choke on their own noise. There's a certain cruelty in how objects hold memories long after people stop deserving them. For me, it was the watch. I'd bought it months earlier. A wedding gift meant for Sophia. Stainless steel, elegant but not flashy. The kind of thing she could wear for decades. On the back, I'd paid extra for an engraving. Our forever May 18th, 25. The date we'd circled on the calendar. The day we were supposed to start our lives together. After everything, the theft, the lies, the screaming at my office, the smear campaigns, I still hadn't touched the box sitting on the top shelf of my closet. Maybe some part of me had been avoiding it. One Saturday morning, I pulled it down. The cardboard felt heavier than it should. Inside, the watch gleamed like nothing had happened, its second hand ticking on, indifferent to betrayal. That engraving cut deeper now than any insult Sophia had thrown at me. Our forever. 2 words that felt like a punchline. I closed the box, grabbed my keys, and drove across town. The pawn shop sat on the corner of a cracked strip mall, sandwiched between a payday loan office and a laundromat. The kind of place where dreams and illusions get cashed in for pennies on the dollar. Inside, The air smelled like dust and metal polish. Guitars lined one wall, rifles behind glass on the other. The man behind the counter looked up from a magazine, sizing me up like he could smell the story on me. "What did you get?" he asked. I slid the box across the counter, popped it open. The watch caught the fluorescent lights, winking like it was mocking me. He whistled low. "Nice piece. You sure you want to part with it?" I held his gaze, my voice steady. "Positive." He examined it, turned it over, his eyes catching on the engraving. "Rough one, huh?" "Something like that," I said. He named a number. I didn't even haggle. It wasn't about the cash. When the bills hit my palm, it felt like I just shaved 20 pounds off my shoulders. Walking out of that shop, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I wasn't richer in money, but I was richer in something else. Freedom. That watch had been the last physical tie to a future that no longer existed. By selling it, I wasn't just cutting Sophia off financially or legally. I was cutting her out of the narrative I'd once built in my head. Driving home, the box now empty in the passenger seat, I realized closure doesn't arrive all at once. Comes in fragments. In paperwork, in silence, in letting go of symbols that once defined you. I didn't need our forever. I only needed my future. Courtrooms aren't built for drama the way TV makes you think. There are no soaring speeches, no pounding gavels echoing like thunder. It's beige walls, bad lighting, and the steady shuffle of paperwork. Justice doesn't roar. It grinds. Months after I filed the report, I sat in the gallery, suit pressed, folder of documents tucked neatly under my arm. Across the aisle, Sophia sat at the defense table. She wore a muted dress, hair pulled back, trying for a look of humility. Dylan slouched beside her in an ill-fitting jacket, tattoos peeking from his cuffs, smirking like the whole thing was beneath him. The prosecutor laid it out plainly. 3 transfers totaling nearly $19,000. Direct evidence of theft. My bank records, my screenshots, the fraud investigator's testimony. Then they pulled up Dylan's Instagram, projected on the courtroom screen for everyone to see. Shiny new denim equipment, brag posts about leveling up his studio, all dated days after the money vanished. The jury didn't need a speech. The case was airtight. Sophia's lawyer tried to spin it, called it a misunderstanding, said she believed the money was joint, and claimed Dylan was supposed to pay it back. But every word fell flat under the weight of the paperwork. When it came time for Sophia to speak, her voice was soft, rehearsed. She called it a mistake. She said she was desperate to help someone she once cared about. She even glanced at me once, eyes wet, like she expected to see the man who once loved her looking back. All she got was stone. Dylan didn't bother with theatrics. He just shrugged, muttered about investments, and leaned back like jail was just another pit stop in his life. The verdict came quick. Sophia pled guilty to felony theft. 5 years probation, restitution ordered in full. No jail time, but the felony stuck. A scar she'd carry on every job application, every background check, every time she pretended to be the victim. Dylan, with a prior fraud conviction, wasn't so lucky. 6 months in county jail, restitution to follow. The smirk finally drained off his face when the cuffs clicked around his wrists. I didn't smile, didn't fist pump, didn't feel the surge of triumph people imagine. Sitting there, listening to the judge's monotone, all I felt was finality. Cold, quiet, unshakable finality. Sophia looked small as she left the courtroom, Ralph and Diana on either side, whispering frantically, their faces pale and drawn. They still thought they could shield her, twist the story, bend reality around her mistakes. They hadn't yet realized that the law didn't care about their excuses. I stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, loosened my tie, and let the sun hit my face. It wasn't the joy I felt. It was something heavier but cleaner, like a weight had shifted from my shoulders onto theirs. Justice hadn't roared, but it had ground on, slow and steady, until the liars were caught beneath its wheels. Most people think the criminal case is the end of the road. Jail time, probation, restitution, wrap it up, fade to black. But men like me know better. A felony conviction isn't just punishment. It's leverage. And leverage is only useful if you know how to pull it. With Sophia's guilty plea on record, my lawyer and I moved forward with the civil suit. He was a sharp man, mid-40s, who spoke in clipped sentences and carried the kind of confidence that made judges lean forward. "It's straightforward," he told me, sliding papers across his desk. "She admitted to the theft. That's half the battle already won." We filed for the full balance, $18,500, plus attorney's fees. The hearing was clinical, almost boring compared to the criminal trial. No theatrics, no sob stories. Just exhibits, signatures, and the judge's tired voice confirming what I already knew. Judgment in my favor. That judgment meant one thing: garnishment. Every paycheck Sophia earned, a slice of it came to me before she even touched it. At first, the payments trickled in steadily, around $70 a month. Not enough to rebuild my savings quickly, but enough to remind me of the chain around her ankle. Every envelope that arrived was proof that my silence and paperwork had outlasted her noise. But then she lost her job. Probation rules don't play around. Miss restitution and jail becomes the next stop. Suddenly Diana and Ralph were in the spotlight, and they didn't like the heat. I started hearing whispers through mutual acquaintances. Ralph had pulled from his retirement early. Diana had taken out a second mortgage on their house. All to keep their daughter afloat, all to keep her from tasting the full bite of her own decisions. When the checks started coming from a new address, I didn't even blink. It was almost poetic. The same parents who had stormed my office, screaming about how I was controlling and cold, were now draining their own future to pay me for their daughter's betrayal. I didn't crow about it, didn't send messages or gloat. That wasn't my style. My style was to cash every check, file every statement, and let the math tell the story. Months stretched on. Their house went up for sale. Ralph looked thinner the last time I saw him across the courthouse hall. Diana's eyes had that wild, cornered look of someone who finally realized the world doesn't bend to her version of events. They wanted me to crack, to feel pity, to drop it all and be the bigger man. But being a man isn't about pity. It's about accountability. And accountability doesn't bend because someone whines loud enough. Every dollar they handed over wasn't just repayment. It was proof. Proof that my patience was stronger than their excuses. Proof that the paper trail I built was worth more than every accusation they'd thrown at me. Proof that, in the end, the truth grinds everyone down, no matter how hard they resist. And if that grinding cost them their retirement, their home, their comfort, that was the price of their arrogance. They'd chosen to shield Sophia from consequence. They'd chosen to burn themselves down for her. All I did was step aside and let them strike the match. It was a Tuesday evening when the call came. I just cracked a beer, a ball game humming on the TV, when my phone buzzed with a number I almost didn't recognize. Ralph. I considered letting it ring out, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. His voice came through thin and tired, like a man dragging chains. "Jordan, we lost the house." I didn't say anything, just wait. Years in data taught me patience. People fill silence with more than they intend. Sure enough, he kept talking. "Diana and we put everything into covering Sophia's mess. Retirement's gone. We're renting a little condo now. And all for what? You've ruined us." That last part came out sharper, like he'd been rehearsing it. There it was, the real reason for the call. Not to inform, to blame. I leaned back in my chair, letting the cold beer sweat against my hand. "Ralph," I said evenly, "let's be clear. I didn't ruin you. Your daughter stole from me. The court made her accountable. You decided to torch your savings to shield her. That was your choice." He bristled. "She's our daughter. What were we supposed to do? Let her rot in jail?" "Yes," I said bluntly, "because that's how people learn. Actions, consequences. Instead, you cushioned her fall and set yourself on fire in the process. That's not loyalty. That's denial." The line went quiet. I pictured him on the other end, shoulders sagging, realizing he'd walked straight into a wall he couldn't push through. Finally, his voice dropped, almost a whisper. "You're colder than I thought." I took a slow drink, let the bitterness roll on my tongue before answering. No, Ralph, I'm clear. I saved for a wedding. She stole it. You covered for her. Everyone here made their choices. Don't put your ashes at my doorstep. There was a long exhale, then nothing. He hung up without a goodbye. I set the phone down, turned back to the game. My pulse hadn't even spiked. Because when you know the truth, when you stand on bedrock, no amount of guilt can move you. A year and a half later, my life looks nothing like the one I planned. And that's the best part. The wedding fund is long gone, but I rebuilt it. Month by month, paycheck by paycheck, my savings account grew back. This time, it isn't earmarked for a ceremony or a honeymoon. It's mine. A foundation for whatever I decide comes next. I moved into a new apartment, smaller, simpler, but with a view of the river that catches the sunset just right. The kind of place where silence feels peaceful instead of hollow. My old furniture didn't all fit, but I didn't care. Starting over doesn't need perfect symmetry. I reconnected with friends I'd let drift during the engagement. Beer with the guys on Fridays. Weekend hikes. Long conversations that didn't circle back to flower arrangements or guest lists. It felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I hadn't noticed I'd given away. Travel became my new indulgence. A long weekend in Nashville. A solo trip to Colorado. Hiking trails until my legs burned and the mountain air scrubbed the last of Sophia's ghost from my lungs. Each trip reminded me the world was bigger than betrayal. The restitution payments still come in, though they've shrunk. The envelopes used to have Sophia's name. Now they carry her parents' return address, scrawled smaller each month as if ashamed. $70 at a time, dripping into a separate account I barely touch. One day I might donate it to a scholarship fund. Turn the wreckage of what she stole into something useful. Every so often, I catch myself thinking about the watch, the engraved, Our Forever. I wonder if some stranger wears it now, unaware of the story etched into its steel. The thought doesn't sting anymore. It just feels like a chapter one closed with a pawn ticket. Sophia? Last I heard, she's still living under her parents' roof, scraping by under probation, her record trailing her like a shadow she can't shake. Dylan vanished after county jail, probably chasing his next mark. None of it concerns me anymore, because the truth is simple. I walked away intact. My money will come back. My pride never left. And while they're still tangled in the wreckage they created, I'm free. Betrayal leaves a scar, yes, but scars don't bleed. They just remind you of what you survived. I sip coffee on my balcony some mornings, watching the river carry sunlight downstream, and I think, she thought she stole my future. What she really did was clear the path for a better one.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.